Hi guys, welcome to another video. I've been really enjoying creating content so far and having some cool interactions with you guys in the process. This video will be me ranking my favourite movies from the Skywalker saga from 9 all the way through to 1. Without further delay, let's get into the video. Starting at number 9 is The Last Jedi. As some of you may already know, Luke Skywalker means a lot to me, as he was my hero growing up from the age of 4. So, to see the direction his character was taken in this movie was incredibly disappointing and upsetting to me, as this just was not the Luke I grew up with at all. I will never for the life of me understand how Luke could still see the good in Darth Vader after all of the evil he had committed. However, his first instinct was to kill his nephew Ben Solo after a bad dream. Not only this, after Kylo Ren and his Knights of Ren destroyed the temple, Luke just runs away to Ahch-To to die, as well as completely disconnecting from the Force. Whereas in the Book of Boba Fett, where we see Luke training Grogu, Luke tells Grogu, "Get back up. Always get back up." That's the Luke I grew up with and idolized, not the one we were presented with in The Last Jedi. Trying to be as positive as I can, I'm happy to say that the film did have some amazing cinematography, such as the scene where Admiral Holdo goes into hyperspace through Snoke's ship and the fleet behind it in order to allow the remaining rebels to get to Crait. At number 8, The Force Awakens. I struggled a little bit to separate this film and the one I have ranked just after it, however when coming up with a bit of a pros and cons list, I believe I'm able to justify it. The first installment of the sequels definitely gave us fans a bit of hope going into the future, but on reflection there are a couple major standouts to me that I wasn't a fan of. One of them being the fact that Luke and Han didn't get a scene together. Not only would this have meant a lot to the fans, but I'm sure it would have meant a lot to Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford, as Mark has stated in previous interviews. Another thing that stood out to me was that some of it felt like a bit of a copy and paste from A New Hope. Rey, the main protagonist, is a great pilot with Force abilities she was unaware of, located on a desert planet. Her mentor, Han Solo, is killed by the main antagonist. She's unwillingly thrown from her life at home into this galactic battle. Does that sound a bit familiar? I think the only difference there is, Rey was more unwilling than Luke. Luke wanted to get out there, he wanted to get away from Tatooine, whereas Rey was eager to get back. Her parents might be there waiting for her by now or something like that. It was also the beginning of the teasing we'd endure throughout the sequel trilogy as to whether we were ever going to see Finn build upon his obvious potential with the Force. The last point I had was, I could never understand how Rey was able to effectively deal with Kylo Ren, someone who had been trained in the Force from a young age, yet Rey hadn't had a day of training. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't all bad. It had some super cool scenes, such as seeing Han and Chewie again back in the Millennium Falcon, as well as getting our Princess Leia back. At number 7 is The Rise of Skywalker. Now, this is one of the biggest what could have been films for me. Going into seeing this when it released, I was still extremely disappointed from The Last Jedi. So I went into this with no real expectations, other than wanting to see Anakin as a Force ghost at some point. I mean, he is the Skywalker, right? Wouldn't it make sense to see him at some stage to conclude the Skywalker saga? We got his voice, I guess. There were rumours going around that scenes had actually been filmed, where Force ghosts of the Jedi's voice we hear appear when they call out to Rey before she defeats Palpatine once and for all. If these rumours were indeed true, and we were robbed of a scene of that magnitude, I'd be extremely disappointed, as it was the one thing I was hoping for. Not only what I was hoping for, but it would have helped the fact that Palpatine returning did a disservice to Anakin's whole character arc, where it concluded with him destroying the Emperor and saving the galaxy, as well as Luke in the process. Just a quick side note, seeing the Force Ghost appear, there have actually been quite a few fan edits of this scene going around on YouTube, and there are a couple that actually feature Anakin quite prominently, and they give me absolute chills. They are so well done, and I'm really sad we didn't get to see it actually in the film, because I think it would have been extremely cool. However, I digress. One of the other points I wanted to mention was the lack of attention time and screen time Finn and Rose got, especially after how Rose was built up in The Last Jedi, and then almost completely disregarded in this movie. It was very odd, I thought. In saying all this, I think they did do a very fine job with how they handled the character of Princess Leia after Carrie Fisher's passing, helping save the galaxy one last time with her final act. The reaction of R2-D2, and especially Chewie when he returns and finds out she is gone, will always get me. It's super emotional stuff. It was also very sweet how Carrie's daughter Billie Lourd got to play a role alongside her mum throughout the trilogy and do the acting for the flashback scene with Leia training with Luke. Now, number 6 is The Phantom Menace. It's not a bad film at all in my eyes, it's just that I found all the ones I've ranked above it better. This was the beginning of the prequel trilogy, which are the films that were released in the early stages of my childhood, so they all have a bit of a deeper meaning to me. We got some amazing scenes in this movie, such as the first appearances of Darth Maul, indicating the re-emergence of the Sith. We were also treated with one of the most iconic lightsaber duels, with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan battling Maul with the Duel of the Fates soundtrack in the background. We got to see how Anakin came to the Jedi Order, as well as the beginning of his and Padme's friendship that would obviously turn into a relationship. On a deeper level, we also got the first hints of the Jedi Council being wary of Anakin and the Chancellor taking a keen interest in him, which would lead to grooming and manipulation later on. I love seeing all the origin stories, not only the ones I've mentioned, but also R2 and C-3PO. Also, shout out Ahmed Best. Jar Jar was always super entertaining as a kid, and I'm stoked for him that he had a successful return to the franchise in The Mandalorian as Jedi Master Kelleran Beck. In at number 5 is The Attack of the Clones. Now honestly, depending on my mood, this film can be interchangeable with the next 1 or 2 films I've ranked after it. This installment introduced us to the king that is Hayden Christensen, and he went on to absolutely nail the role of Anakin Skywalker. I love the mystery surrounding Kamino, its location, and the operation that was commenced there to mass produce a clone army. Now obviously Jango Fett plays a key role in this, and I always loved his suit of armor as a kid, especially in those scenes battling Obi-Wan in the pouring rain on Kamino. Also, how good was it hearing the seismic charges for the first time? There's not too many better sounds in the franchise. I would also be very remiss not to mention Count Dooku and the role he plays in all of this. Seeing the beginning of all the plans for the Death Star was a big wow moment for me as a kid too, looking at it being like, hey, I know what that is. As I grew older, this also stood out to me as it really began to give me a grasp on just how long Palpatine had been planning and orchestrating the return of the Sith and gaining control of the galaxy. Obviously, one of the major highlights is the Battle of Geonosis. However, in saying all this, the highlight for me personally is still the foreshadowing of Vader with Anakin. Seeing the need for revenge of his mother's death take over him briefly, slaughtering the Tuskens. One of my favourite tracks, the Imperial March, is also played at various points to further foreshadow what is to come. This film has also become better for me since the release of the animated Clone Wars series, given all the backstories to various characters we get in it. Now, at number 4, I've gone with A New Hope. This is where it all started in 1977, and we got this beautiful galaxy far, far away created for us. From memory, this is also the first film of the saga I watched as a 4-year-old. I immediately attached to Luke Skywalker, and he has been one of my heroes ever since. Hearing Obi-Wan tell Luke a bit about his father, which hits a little differently now after the Kenobi series, is always a highlight for me when I rewatch it. There are so many iconic lines we get from this film, such as, "These are not the droids you're looking for," "That's no moon," and "Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper?" The whole Death Star arc of the episode is undoubtedly my favourite though. Seeing our heroes go about rescuing the princess from her cell, however she is the one that then takes the charge. Carrie Fisher and Leia really were one and the same. All whilst this is happening, we have Obi-Wan sneakily going about his business of disabling the tractor beam, knowing full well he wasn't escaping from the Death Star in his physical form. He had his final confrontation with Darth Vader to buy them enough time to escape before becoming one with the Force. However, immediately we can hear his voice still helping Luke. This always confused me as a kid, as I didn't know if Luke was imagining things or what was going on there, until I learned of the Force Ghost concept and its different forms it could present itself in. We get a bit of a continuation of this as well shortly before Luke blows up the Death Star, with Obi-Wan's voice coming to him again, telling him to use the Force, Luke. Super cool stuff. And a shocking voice. Now, we're into the top 3 now, where I've put Empire Strikes Back. I can only imagine the reaction back in 1980 at the big reveal of Vader being Luke's father, but I'm sure my reaction as a kid was somewhere close to it. After that, I don't even know where to start on my highlights in this film. The Hoth battle, Luke hanging off an AT-AT and blowing it up, then Vader storming through the Rebels base in the aftermath. Then our heroes get split up after this, with Luke and R2 heading to the Dagobah system to find Yoda under Obi-Wan's advice, whilst the others are attempting to outrun the Imperial fleet, heading through and hiding in an asteroid field. Vader learns that the boy who destroyed the Death Star may indeed be the offspring of his former self. Now, it may sound dark, but I love seeing Vader just be Vader, I guess. He kills his Imperial officers when they fail him and replaces them with the next in line. I really enjoyed the Dagobah portion of this movie. However, as a kid, I always remember being super confused by the scene where Luke decapitates Vader in the cave for his helmet to then explode and reveal Luke's face. Obviously, there is a deeper meaning there, which I understood later on, and then we get further clarification when we see Yoda travel to Dagobah in the Clone Wars series. The Cloud City was one of my favourite locations in the Star Wars universe growing up. I've been able to visit it not only in this film, but in video games such as LEGO Star Wars The Original Trilogy, the original Battlefronts back on the PS2, and also in Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast with Kyle Katarn. The cinematography we get in the Luke and Vader duel on Bespin is insane. Now, I feel like I've kind of just rambled through why I love this film and definitely left some aspects out in the process, like Han and Leia growing closer and climaxing as Han is frozen in carbonite. We also get introduced to the bounty hunters and especially Boba Fett, and look, I'm doing it again. But there are so many parts I love, and it was hard to narrow down concisely. It's easy to see why so many people have it as their favourite in the saga. Now, a quick disclaimer, obviously there are 2 films left, however, I genuinely, for the life of me, cannot separate them. They are both incredibly special to me for multiple reasons, so with that being said, in at equal first is The Revenge of the Sith. Right from the first scene, it has the best opening of all the films. We get an epic space battle above Coruscant with some great shots. We get a Dooku vs Anakin and Obi-Wan rematch, however obviously most of it is just Anakin vs Dooku. And we see how much stronger Anakin has grown over the last 3 years since episode 2. Palpatine encourages Anakin to kill Dooku when he has him already defeated. Anakin knows he shouldn't, yet he still does it. I love really digging into the little details of Star Wars, so monitoring how over time the Chancellor's groomed Anakin to be Vader, this was quite a key point I thought. Continuing on from this film really accelerates Anakin's fall to the dark side, with the Jedi still not trusting him, in part due to his close friendship with Palpatine, therefore Anakin begins to lose faith in the Council. These are all like little pieces of a puzzle to me that form the reason why Anakin fell to the dark side, and I love putting them together. There are so many cool moments in this film, I'm genuinely struggling to name them all without rambling on too much and, turning it into more of a breakdown rather than just me telling you why I love it. But obviously the 2 major highlights are Order 66 and the duel between Obi-Wan and Anakin, including the lead up to it where Padme was trying to bring him back. Now, I'm not normally very emotional at all, but Star Wars seems to be my weakness, I guess, and it just brings it out of me. I love the little, Easter egg you could call it, of Anakin calling, "Help me, Padme," as the mask gets put on him in his Vader transformation. It is super quiet, so you'll have to listen very carefully if you go back and watch it. What I take out of that is that there's a little piece of Anakin always still there. It really is a great tragedy, the whole film. Anakin and Obi-Wan split apart and battling to the death after Anakin had been manipulated and groomed for a role, but is then betrayed after having lost everything, and is left to suffer in a torture chamber of a suit. Obi-Wan has his whole family murdered by the troopers he had served with for the last 3 years, led by his brother, lost next to everything he had known, thought he's killed his brother as well, and is then forced to seek solitude and find a purpose in protecting Luke for the next 19 years. I know it's against the Jedi way, but I'm sure I speak for a large portion of the fanbase when I say we get really attached to these characters, especially seeing as though they were released in my early childhood. So to me, the fates they each meet is devastating. Anakin doesn't get his happy ending with Padme and their 2 children, and Obi-Wan couldn't help his brother. There are also 2 soundtracks in this film that I actually have on my gym playlist too, Anakin's Dark Deeds and Battle of the Heroes. They are amazing, and I guarantee you'll be hitting PBs immediately. Now, shocking I know, but also in equal first is Return of the Jedi. This was always my favourite as a kid. It was my comfort film if I was homesick from school or just not having a good day. This is where I would turn to as I got to see my hero Luke Skywalker at his strongest, bringing Anakin back and defeating the Emperor. There is genuinely not a single dull moment in this film for me. I love the Jabba's palace arc, ending with Luke being the hero and freeing his friends from a certain death in the Sarlacc pit. R2 shooting his lightsaber to him at the perfect time is one of my favourite scenes in the whole saga. Obviously after the Jabba's palace arc, we go to Dagobah with Luke and R2. We say goodbye to Yoda, which is always tough, but then you pull from that real quick when Obi-Wan informs Luke that he has a sister, soon realising that it is Leia. I love hearing the stories now about how tightly guarded that secret was at the time of making the movie and just how little amount of people actually knew what was going to happen. The forest moon of Endor was one of my favourite planets after watching this for the first time as a kid. We got introduced to the Ewoks and saw them treat C-3PO as a god. Like, what's going on there? Luke confronting Vader before being led to the Emperor is still so powerful for me. You start to get a sense that Vader could be turned, however he still has that cloud hanging over him and that there is nowhere to go. Obviously we know how Luke and Vader's duel goes, with Luke overpowering him after Vader threatens to turn Leia instead. However, Luke has the mental strength to restrain himself before delivering the killing blow. The close-up on Vader's mask as Luke is writhing in pain from the Emperor's lightning is amazing to me. I've always imagined him having flashbacks to Padme and what could have been, and ultimately it's his love for his family that brings Anakin back as he throws the Emperor down the reactor shaft. In the original film, Vader never shouted "no" as he decides on stopping his son's pain. I almost think that version is more powerful, but I'm happy with either. Now, no disrespect to Sebastian Shaw at all, but I'm super glad they put Hayden Christensen in as the Force Ghost for Anakin that appears in front of Luke alongside Yoda and Obi-Wan. It has always been one of my favourite scenes in the franchise, and it capped off the original trilogy perfectly. Thank you so much for watching, guys. This is by far the longest video I've made so far, yet it has also been some of the most fun, going back through my earliest memories of this franchise and what made me fall in love with it. Now I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Let me know your list and where you rank all the Skywalker Saga films. Until next time, may the Force be with you.